everyone. I'm Leslie Cornwell, certified nurse midwife with Midwifery Business Consultation. I have my good friend Izzy with Contemporary Insurance. We've talked a few other times. So if you want to get in more details, Izzy's wonderful, extensive background, you can go to those. But thanks for being on with me again today, Izzy.
As always, my pleasure. Looking forward to it, Leslie.
So one of the things we were talking about before we started hitting recording is I get a lot of consults. I get a lot of people that are brand new practices, or maybe they just graduated school. They want to start, they're not tied down to a certain area. They don't have a family run business. They don't have kids. They don't have, like, they could go anywhere in the country. So I get these questions often like, okay, where should I go? And I always think about the malpractice. Okay, where are the places that you are a little more risk of getting sued? Some of the places, even coverage, because midwives are like, the illusion is too expensive. I would love for you to break down regions of the United States and talking
hmm
about malpractice coverage and maybe barriers or great places for midwives and malpractice insurance.
Okay, so what I'll tell you is to start off by not answering your question and to tell you that the general rule of thumb that I use is that you never have the tail wag the dog. That at the end of the day, any new midwife or any experienced midwife that's considering opening up their own business should decide where they want to live, where they want to practice, and should expect that there will be some economies that will work within those locations to make their business model work. So, for example, if you're going to work in New York, you should expect to charge more for a delivery than if you're working in Maine, for example. And those economies will help supplement what the potential differences in premiums. So the general rule of thumb, though, for me, is start with the business model of what you want. What do you want to live with? What kind of practice do you want to have? Do you want to have a home birth practice? Do you want to have a birth center practice? Do you want to deliver in hospitals? Are you going to do VBACs? Are you not going to do VBACs? Think through all the things that you want to do as a professional, and that's number one. And then say, and now where do I want to live? Okay, all right. Those are the overriding concerns. Now that we said that, let's talk about some of the practical considerations. So sure, some states are very, very different than others. So if you're in New York, there is only one carrier that's available to you, and your premium for mature coverage, that means, let's say if the claim's made, your fifth-year premium is going to be over $30,000 a year. That's a big number to tackle. And if that company, that's the only company selling in New York now, decides it's done, it's taken too many losses, and there are no carriers, then you're saying to yourself,
Very
wow,
vulnerable, yes.
right. Another state that's difficult is New Mexico.
Hmm.
New Mexico is high litigation. Certainly you can get coverage there, actually more reasonably priced than the coverage that's available in New York. And those are, all possible. Other difficult states are Florida. Florida, particularly in Dale County and some similar counties, are very expensive, even though most midwives only carry about $200,000 worth of coverage, not the normal million that we would see elsewhere. That's another high claim. Chicago in certain areas, well, in Illinois, in certain areas, certain counties, in California, obviously places like LA, San Diego, and some of those places will have higher premiums. But I'm going to fall back to what I said before, and that is decide what you want to do with your life before you decide how you want to worry about the premiums and the costs.
I think, yeah,
Um,
it's more of like the detailed number crunching. Of course, I always want to preface this like, if what makes you happy, if you want to be more autonomous, you want the sunshine, you want a certain lifestyle. And these are more of those details when we're doing the business analysis that maybe they've got it narrowed down to 2, 3 states. I could be in New York because my mom's there, but oh my gosh, I've got a sister with nieces and nephews in Nevada. So they typically, when they come to me, have it narrowed down to 2, 3 states. And that can be part of our analysis. Like, okay, you don't have to worry about these hurdles. Like you talked about one insurance carrier, some people's personality, they like security blankets of, okay, what if I have to have a medical director, but they're hard to find. Like those are part of those decision making. So you talked about the states that are harder. So what are some states that are better if you're thinking about malpractice insurance and good coverage levels?
so I would say that Maine is a great place. I would say the non-major centers in California, in Texas, Ohio. I would say that the best place is the best question is where not to be. And those first few states I gave you, The rest is pretty much there. I mean, the range of premium, again, if we use the term mature premium, which is your 5th-year premium, you're running a range from the low states at about 18,000 to the high states at about 42,000, 43,000. So that's the range that you're looking at. Now, that's a lot of deliveries and the difference between those two. And then, of course, the question is in the particular states that you're in, how do the reimbursement models work if, once you're
The
doing the
number
deliveries?
crunching, because a lot of
Yes,
people will say that's a big number, but they're not doing the income and expense analysis to see, okay, can your services, your fee schedule, the average reimbursement support? And that's why we always like to play around with a business plan versus you jump all into it and now you're testing it while you're actually
right.
spending your own money. If you want to dive into a little bit more that 5th year, because I think when I do consults, people are really confused. They start as a new graduate and think, oh, this is my budget, this is what I'm going to pay for malpractice, but they don't coverage that, and they don't. If you want to explain that a little more.
Sure. So most of the coverages that are available, there are some exceptions, but most that are available are claims made coverages, which means that when you cancel the policy, you're going to have to get a tail. And that tail, what claims made coverage is, claims made coverage covers one for the time that they are paying premiums. So if I had a policy for 5 years and I paid premiums for 5 years, I have coverage for 5 years. If I stop paying the premiums and somebody sues me later for something that came in during those 5 years, I only have coverage going forward if I have purchased a one-time endorsement called a tail. It's an extended reporting endorsement, which means that it extends the time for you to report claims past that 5-year period. Tails are expensive. They run anywhere from ours, which is at the low end at 115%, to 250% of the 5th-year premium. And they can be expensive. So if you take a look at a $20,000 premium, the tail at the high end can be $30,000. And then some tails are only good for 3 years and some are good forever. So those are all considerations, but you need to kind of think about that. So if we go back to claims made, most claims made policies start at a low premium. So the first year of coverage, the insurance company only has, the first month it only has a few days of exposure. By the 6th month, it has 5 months of exposure. So the premium actually goes up every year for 5 years. And the reason is that in the 6th year, the insurance company assumes that any claims that would have come in for the first year that you were insured have probably come in already. There's no need to charge for those anymore. So by the 5th year, you get to what's called the mature premium, which is the highest premium you're going to pay. So if we assume a base premium, which is the mature premium of 20,000, in the first year, you're going to pay about 35% of that, then 45, then 55, then 75, and then 100%. So over the 5-year period, you'll reach up to that 20,000. So it's always good to ask the insurance broker that you're working with, if it's claims made, is what's the mature premium? Because that's the premium that you're going to pay in the 5th year, unless rates go up or down, in which case that premium also can be adjusted.
And I've seen that where sometimes the policy, the estimation is written, they'll just say exactly now, and then they'll have the trends going up, and sometimes they don't. And so I've had quite a few newer graduates start practices, and they don't budget, they don't understand this 12,000 you're paying right now is not what you're going to pay every single year. You need to account, and that's why it's important to look at your fee schedules and your budgets regularly, because typically it's going to keep going up till year 5.
Correct. It's actually not a bad idea to put money away for that tail. Now, the thing to keep in mind is if you actually stay with the carrier you've been with for a while, or you cover yourself for 5 years and then you retire and you're at least 55 years old, most companies will give you a free tail. So you
Oh,
don't have to
that's
worry
good to know.
about paying for it at that point. Or for death or disability, you would get a free tail. So it's not, you may not have to pay that tail, but you should be ready to pay it.
Be
And
willing
that's
and have a budget for it. Mhm.
that's right. Either that or make sure your employer is prepared to pay it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that comes down to our last conversation we had. I think it was the first one. When you're a brand new, whether you're starting your own business or you're hiring, like you are more than happy to have a conversation with them, like a new potential candidate for a job interview. Like if they get coverage put to them, what questions to ask. You had great answers to that before. Because I think sometimes we focus so much on the business owner. You're just as vulnerable being the employee and having malpractice. Yes, you're not the deep pocket like a hospital is, but you're still part of the lawsuit.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, I guess the other question I have for you, Izzy, we were talking about the coverages. Are there certain clauses? Are there certain things to ask for? We talked about VBACs. We talked about settings. Like, are there anything when someone is considering policies that they should be asking for or excluded from those policies?
So what I would say is that all the policies that are available right now are being sold by brokers. I'm not aware of any policy
So
that's
pretty
being
consistent.
sold directly by the company.
Okay.
Um, the broker, speaking really bluntly, has an incentive to sell as much as he can because he gets the commission based on the premium. Um, we don't try to upsell, but the broker is your best source of what's available in addition to that policy. So, for example, you can buy up. One of the things that most policies have is a certain amount of money that's available for, let's say, there's a licensing board action against you. Some policies will provide 25,000 towards legal fees. Some will provide 50,000. In some cases, you can buy that up to as much as you want, 100,000, 250,000. So I think one of the things to ask that a midwife should always ask the broker is what else is available in the policy. Now, the things that you would see would be things like HIPAA coverages. So, for example, if let's say you make a mistake, and actually had a call from one of my insureds. Actually, wasn't a midwife; it was a physician who one of her staff inadvertently sent out an email to 20 clients about their about some procedure that they had had, and instead of blind copying all of the emails, put the emails on the top line. So now everyone who got it got knows all the other people. Well, that creates reporting requirements. So most of the policies have a certain amount of HIPAA coverage, but again, it's going to be at a low level of 25 or 50,000. One of the things that you might also need is a thing called subpoena coverages. And that is in the event that you get a subpoena to testify, not because the patient you saw is suing you, but because you have specialized expertise that makes you a fact witness. Will they provide someone to go with you, an attorney? And usually that's about 5,000 or 10,000 of coverage. Not a very important part of coverage, but it is there. Medicare and Medicaid fraud and abuse coverage, and that is upcoding. If let's say a normal procedure should be coded for a half hour, but the federal government feels that you've been upcoding it for 3/4 of an hour, and they come after you, and that's very expensive because the government doesn't worry about how much it pays its attorneys. So you have that kind of
The
coverage. Now,
taxpayers are the deep pocket. They could go on and on and on.
yes. The other piece is general liability. Now, often general liability is things like slips and falls. It has nothing to do with the medical piece. Generally speaking, it's hard for birth centers to get that coverage. Some policies provide it, but usually it's not expensive, about $250 a year. So of all of the coverages that I just mentioned, the only one that's probably important is the general liability, the 250. The other ones, so in small practices, I don't think that most midwives need to worry about HIPAA violations. I think, you because it's
We have a
one
really
file at a
good
time.
relation. Yeah, I was gonna say our
Yeah,
clients are.
I don't think you're as concerned about that. I think the same is true of Medicare and Medicaid fraud and abuse coverages.
Yeah. I
Subpoena
think the
coverage
legal
is like,
defense has its potential because there's a lot of situations that midwives think of malpractice because of like a rare extreme situation where they could get sued for millions. But I see it most of the time where they do a transport and now they've got to defend themselves because their competitor put a complaint to the state and you've got to defend yourself to the licensing board and you don't know the lingo and it drags on and it gets a lot more. And then you finally get a lawyer on and you don't realize how expensive all that stuff is. So I found the benefit with the malpractice, making sure there is that clause for that legal defense. Not so much that you did anything wrong, but you have someone on your side that's part of your policy so that if you are being put to the board, whether it's just cause, but you still have to defend yourself.
so Leslie, I think you hit the nail on the head because the truth is often these things start because a competitor got pissy with you and filed a complaint.
Yep.
And so the OBGYN in your neighborhood doesn't like midwives. And this is a perfect opportunity because something went south and they filed board
may
action.
or may not be anything to do with you, but because they got
And-
to touch the chart and this was their opportunity to act.
Exactly right. And so what I'd say is that two of the three major sellers include legal defense coverage of at least 25,000. A third one, which is also a major seller, I believe, does not include that in its policy. Um, and I don't think you can add it to that policy, but the two that do provide it, I don't believe allow you to buy up, but they provide at least 25,000,
Yep.
and that's probably enough.
For
in
most of the time,
cases.
that is, once they know you're serious and you get someone on board and you have them talking the lingo in front of the board, it's usually one meeting. But what happens is the midwives try to defend themselves, then they dig the hole deeper because they don't understand. And now it's a like that's I see that's what I see happen most of the time. It's not the really bad outcome, you were negligent, this is obvious. It's the other situation where your competitor didn't like you. There was no just cause, they just wanted to make things difficult, and you put yourself in a hole with the board because you didn't know the lingo, you didn't have it. So that's where I see it most
Oh,
of
it's,
the time.
I'm also an attorney, and I practiced for quite some time, and we all watch TV. And what I will tell you is what TV and practice teaches you is when you're confronted with a situation like that, the best answer is no answer and get a
Mhm.
professional.
Yeah.
And then the professional will tell you. So, you see all the TV shows where they say, I'm lawyering up. And I'm not saying a word like it, my lawyer, really smart.
Yeah.
If a
Yeah,
midwife
that's
finds
not them
himself,
playing on TV. That's actual real life advice.
That's
Yes.
that's real word, real, and I have to tell you, I can't even tell you how often is a person under attack feels compelled to speak and they shouldn't.
Yeah. Well, because that's your innate human nature is I want to defend myself. I want to defend myself. And that's,
Correct.
on the other side, they want you to get vulnerable. They want you to spill the beans on something else they weren't even going into. So it's hard for midwives for sure.
And what I would tell you is in addition to board actions, the same is true in potential malpractice claims. There's two reasons you never speak about a potential malpractice claim other than with your attorney. One is there is no lawyer-client privilege protecting you for things that you said. So if I talk to you and I say, Leslie, I had this horrible outcome and mother died. I don't think anything wrong, but I have this nagging doubt about this one little thing that maybe I should have done. You're discoverable. I can call you as a witness and I can put you on the stand and you have to testify. If I say the same thing to my lawyer, it's totally shielded by lawyer-client privilege. And rest assured that a good plaintiff's counsel finds out everyone who you've talked to because they'll ask you and you have to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
So you cannot. So that's why the rule of thumb is in business, you never say what you don't have to say. And when you have a potential claim, you speak only to your attorney.
Okay. So I guess one last thing that I would love, because a lot of times we have near misses. We have, okay, there's that potential. I think this may turn into something. It was a bad outcome. I have a great relationship. We've delivered 3 other babies before, but it's a higher risk. How should that relationship go with the malpractice? Is there anything proactive for like conflict resolution or I think a lot of times we think, well, I don't want to call the malpractice unless now we're in court and there's a problem. Like, I think there is benefit to giving a heads up to the malpractice insurance company, and they're not going to ding your report and now charge you double because you called about a potential. Like, that's my understanding.
So what I would tell you is that most major carriers want to help with potential claims. Having said that, the last thing they want is someone who's calling them every day with a potential problem.
Yeah, extremes.
So, yeah, maybe 30 years ago, I had a doctor who applied for coverage with me, and he had reported 30 incidents in the past year to his insurance company. And of course, every one of those incidents goes on what's called the loss run, which reported that no, there was no money ever spent by the insurance company, but 30 times he felt that the outcome was significantly bad enough that he should report it to the company. I had a really hard time getting him coverage. So there's a giggle test. Now, I actually, on my blog, I talk about when to report, when not, but I will tell you this. The rule of thumb is like this. If you feel that something has gone so wrong that there's a reasonable possibility that there'll be a claim, you probably should report it. Okay. If on the other hand, it's something that is something that you notified the patient of as being a real possibility, you gave the informed consent. So I'm just trying to think of of an example. The
Like even just an unintended, they have an allergy you didn't know about, like you gave them a med, they had an adverse reaction to it, they didn't know they had that allergy. There wasn't anything you could have done proactively to make that like aware of the
Right.
situation, like those
So
kind
what
of.
I would say is that something like an IUD placement, where it just didn't fit right, didn't go right, and it later on causes some kind of an injury. And you have a great relationship with the patient, and you explain that, you know what, it just didn't set well, and that's fine. Let's go ahead and fix it. I don't think you need to report that. If you have, let's say you have a stillbirth, stillbirths happen, and unless there are conditions that require that say this could look bad, or let's say the parents are really angry with you and threatening lawsuits, well, in those cases you definitely report it, otherwise not. Maternal death, you always report a maternal death, because the lawyers are out there sitting, looking at the records, and you can be sure 9 times out of 10 with a maternal death you're going to get sued. So there's some things that just as if they happen, it's bad, like a maternal death. But having said that, a fetal demise is not necessarily something that leads to a lawsuit, because we all know that not every baby is born perfect or healthy and the like. And as sad as it is, they don't always lead to suits. And the last piece of that is that midwives tend not to be sued because they keep their relationships with their patients, even when they have bad outcomes.
Well, I'm definitely going to find your blog post that you have, Izzy, and we'll put it at the link below because I think that would be a great resource for the midwives. Is there any other advice or like maybe some questions that came up the last couple months since we chatted? Anything that would be good tips for midwives to end today's conversation?
So I think we've actually done well. I think that at the end of the day, um, there's a real strong balance between midwifery offering a friendly, close relationship and a professional, distant relationship. And how do you put the bridge between those two? And so, for example, I have had midwives who called me and said, I had a bad outcome. Can I apologize to my patient? Well, the answer is, of course you can. You can call your patient. I'm
But
really
we
sorry
get
this
so nervous, we
happened.
don't know like what we can and can't do when those tensions happen. Sometimes it's
That's
that
right.
unknown area where we want to do this. Well, I guess that's the part of watching TV where they tell you don't talk to them anymore. So then which
So
parts do
you're
you see?
you're not apologizing for making a mistake. You're apologizing for there being
Oh,
a
what
bad
happened?
outcome.
Yeah.
If I would happen here, and just, if someone says to you, did I make a did you make a mistake? Well, then you have to say, I don't think so, but let's go over the file together. And then you bring in an attorney because it becomes important. But at the end of the day, the most important thing that a midwife has that many physicians don't have is a special relationship. And that if they keep that special relationship and they do it business-like, they're going to be in good shape.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end today's conversation. I appreciate your knowledge and time, Izzy. What's a great way they can get a hold of you if they have questions about different malpractice options?
So we have a website. It's www.cisinsurance.com. Our phone number is 301-933-3373. And talk to most of your friends. Almost every one of them knows me.
Yeah, I was going to say you're definitely a national icon with midwives. There's a few other companies, but I think you've been doing it the longest, and having that attorney combination and the passion. Like, I mean, you live and breathe midwifery, your kids live and breathe midwifery. So midwives can feel that. They can feel the passion behind advocating for us. So thank you
I
for
do. And
everything.
every time I visit one of my granddaughters who was caught by her mom, I get a special bit of pleasure out of that. So
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Izzy, and you have a
You
wonderful
got it.
rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.